All right, last video. So is this different from the rest we know? This is where we left off. Basically, again, use what is appropriate for your environment. Yes, level 3 adds on a ton of complexity for your applications. Is it necessary? Depends on your application and your environment. One of the things that we didn't really talk about too much here in level 3 was the amount of out-of-band information or domain knowledge that's getting kind of removed here, right? I don't need to refer to a particular document to understand how to build up a menu for a particular page. I could just have, say, a div filled up with bullet points that are links to these particular actions. I don't need to know based on the fact that the user is on page 1, then they clicked on page 2, then they got to page 3. Now we need to render this link and this link and this link. And then if the backend API changes, well, all that's broken, right? That's kind of the level 0 through 2 style. Here, this is all dynamically generated, and it's all coming via RESTful calls, which are giving us XML or JSON or, again, whatever representation you're using to just build up our web pages kind of seamlessly. But again, you need all that framework in place to handle this. Okay, so benefits here. If we change the API, and again, that's the endpoints that talk to each other, one or the other is going to break, right? So if things are tightly coupled, you change something in one, you have to update it in the other. If you fully decouple things, you don't necessarily have that restriction, or at least it's going to be minimized. I'm not going to assume that it's always not going to be changing. All right. Other things, our API is something that we will publish. We have to know how to talk to something, what kind of data to get back, right? That still has to be there. We have to agree on a standard to discuss if we are two applications trying to talk to each other. But we will understand the types of information we'll be getting to and from, what we have to look for to build up these dynamic pages, and how to really, kind of make these seamless, flexible applications. Other things too, if we are going this route, this kind of pushes us towards standardization. Obviously, there are numerous standards on the internet for how HTTP is formatted, how HTML, XML, all of these various languages are formatted. There are strides being made to standardize REST and standardize these basically hypermedia style applications. Now, there is not a standard that exists specifically for REST. There are numerous suggestions out there. There are a lot of groups working, trying to make these standards a reality. But if we all start, kind of programming to APIs, there are some kind of common strategies that start manifesting. We all start using very similar libraries, make similar calls, and it eventually will hopefully normalize a bit. But if we were going to try to standardize things, there was attempts in the past with OData, where OData it's kind of similar. I'll let you read through this page on OData, but basically it's a data model standard, more based on XML than JSON. There are some ideal REST standards. These are not specifically available for REST. There are some status codes here. These are all suggestions and it's standards for various protocols, but there's not a pure RESTful protocol, I guess is kind of the point I was trying to make. But there are a lot of standards that are out there that can help you as you build up your RESTful APIs. Okay, so a lot of benefits here. The disadvantage that I'm not showing you is that, again, this adds complexity to your application. And it's one of those things that once you get it set, all of your future updates should be a lot more minimal, a lot less headache. The build up to that point can be difficult though. And fortunately, there are, example frameworks and there are modules out there we can use at this point. Okay, so this is just to kind of summarize here. We're making a RESTful call. Just again, this is in the hate OAS. I love this acronym. It's not a mouthful in the least. Basically, we start a request by making our various HTTP verb calls, whether it's get or put or post or whatever it is. We make that initial call, and then all of our interactions with our server and the various endpoints are going to be driven by whatever data is embedded in these packets. I don't need to know that I have to go to page 1 and then I have to click this on page 2 and then do this on page 3 and then post this on page 4. Our interaction between client and server is going to be governed by the data sent back and forth. That's the dream, at least here anyway. So how do we get this in terms of HTML, based on what we currently know and love? So I've got a few examples from Dr. Engelsma here. So in this case, I'm just going to go through, one of them here. So let's say we have some form where I want to send my email to a script that's going to save it, maybe to a database or something like that, right? So I have a form here. What this means is that once I click the submit button, I'm going to start my interaction with the server, right? So I will submit an HTTP post request, and we see that here with this method. We are going to send our email as part of our packet, and it's going to go to the server. Server then will interpret what we sent. The server will then create a path for us to follow once it receives a request and sends it back. Whether that is a link to the processing page, whether that is a JSON object where we might have some kind of an embedded API talking, they go back and forth for a while until the user sees success. Basically, again, the idea here is that something like this, maybe we don't necessarily need to hard code it, or in this case, this is the starting off point where everything else is kind of automatically generated for us. Okay, and you can basically extrapolate that from here. Now, where are we at currently on the web in terms of APIs? Well, pretty much any major web application that's out there that is, I guess, developer friendly, for lack of a better word, will have a published API available to you. I've got a few here, Twitter, Discord, Reddit. Refuse to put Facebook up there on principle. You can make the same claim for Twitter, I suppose. But let's say you want to interact with this particular environment, and I am not a Twitter developer, right? Maybe I'm a hobbyist, or maybe I'm making a bot or a script or something. Let's say it's for good purposes, not nefarious purposes. Well, here is the published Twitter API. Here is how to start interacting with our server, right? If I want to get a list of, well, it looks like this is information about a particular user, here is the curl call that I need to make to access information about this user. Or I could get a list of tweets. I could get a list of the top 500 tweets per hashtag, right? These are all going to be published API calls for me to follow. Now, are those going to also send back links to what I do next? Depends on the API, right? Twitter is interesting because they're kind of, at least this year, they've been changing who can access it. You need to either be a student or a researcher or a developer, and you're limited based on how many calls you can make based on your classification. So Twitter is an interesting example. Discord has a similar thing where you can create bots, you can create scripts to interact with Discord users. And again, hopefully you're all taking advantage of the Discord server to, talk to me and your fellow students and get help and interact and all that. But you could write a Discord bot that plays games with you. You could write a Discord bot that goes and looks up Wikipedia. But in order to do that, you need to talk to the Discord API so that your bot can interact with a server. And again, in here, there will be a list of curl commands, a list of interaction ways to talk to the Discord backend. You need authentication and all that. Again, you're probably not going to get links back from the server of what to do next, because level 3 is just, again, it doesn't seem to be all that common with a lot of these big APIs, unless if they really believe in this paradigm. All right, and then Reddit to round this out as well. This has a kind of a nice, I like their central list of APIs here. So if I want to interact with Reddit programmatically, here are all the endpoints that I would call based on what I want to do. Okay, so do I want information about me? Do I want information about CAPTCHA? Do I want to get user flare? Do I want to give gold to a particular user, right? What do I want to do? Well, here's all the endpoints that I need to talk to. I would click one of these endpoints, and I would get information back about how I need to form a HTTP request to talk to this endpoint. Again, these typically will be widely published if the particular API you're working with is developer friendly. And let's say it's not an open environment, let's say it's closed and it's at work, well, then you're probably going to have documentation to sift through for how to talk to that API. And based on your environment, it may implement a different level of REST, and they're probably not even going to bring it up. So just to kind of cap things off, again, there's no real RESTful standard. There are a lot of suggestions out there for how to do this. There are some attempts at standardizing these suggestions. There are other formats, right? REST is not the end all be all. It's just kind of taken over because it's the simplest. There are other formats too. So way back in the day, micro formats was a new and exciting thing. This was for formatting your pages, whether you're showing a web page or a business card or something like that. They still exist, but basically you're just embedding your data in HTML here. It's not like a JSON packet. There are the Atom web standards. If you want to go a different route, you can write your own standard. Again, there's a lot of flexibility with the web and with how you transmit data to and from. REST has taken over. Is it real REST? Not unless you really want it to be. Okay. So let's say you want to create your own Hypermedia API. You like the idea of a level 3 REST, but you don't know where to go. So what do you need? Well, the easiest thing would be just to grab a level 3 RESTful module, which I've got a couple demos on in future videos. But let's say you want to build this thing yourself. You have an internal application your company wants. Okay. Well, first and foremost, you have to build up an API. And what that means is that you need to figure out what kind of calls your clients want to make, what kind of responses your servers are going to make. What are the endpoints? Which entity is serving which resource? Which verbs do you support? Basically, figure out how this API is going to work. If you're taking software engineering, this is getting to your design documentation. Okay, continuing on with the software engineering bit, draw a state diagram. And what this could mean, I've got a view here of one particular interaction. What are the states of your application going to be? Okay, so we start off here. We make a call to get the root of our server. Well, that's going to return the home page. I get a list of messages. Okay, so we're going to make an endpoint call here to the root / messages. Well, that should send us a list of messages back. Then I want to get a particular message. So then we're going to talk to this endpoint again with an ID. We return an individual message. Again, this can be abstract and upper level as you want it to be, but it's good to understand how your application flows from one state to another. Applies to any application, not just the web. Okay, then once you have this information in place, you should probably know what your application is going to be doing, minimally. Then you're going to take advantage of existing semantic descriptions. And I've been throwing this term semantic around a bit. That's basically the meaning of a word. Now, HTML, HTML5, we have this notion of semantic web elements. That's where you could use EM, you could use I, you could use strong or B. They do the same thing technically, but they have widely different meanings, right? Same thing with using a div or a table or a link versus an A. Basically, these tags should have meaning, and based on the application you're writing, different elements will have different meanings. If you start building something like a search engine, this becomes really, really important. Anyway, so we get to this point. Okay, well, we have states, we have ways to get back and forth, we have hopefully an understanding of what our data is going to mean. Well, let's pick a format now. Do you want to do JSON, which is probably the most common currently? Do you want to do XML? Do you want to package up a blob? How do you want to send your data? Right, there are numerous ways to do that. Pick a common one. Then, if you are going the pure, RESTful API standard approach, you have to write out how your application will interface. What are the link relationships? What are the meanings of them? How does somebody interpret your data? Right, again, think of your application as this decentralized thing where it's routing users from place to place. What do all these things mean to me, an external developer? How do I interpret that? And if you're doing all this internally, think of how the interns are going to interpret your API, because they're probably not going to know, or somebody in a completely different department. And then publish it. Make a nice website, right? List out all your API calls. List out how you authenticate. List out how you get access. basically describe everything properly and document it. All right. So just to kind of round this out, last slide, I promise. REST has numerous meanings to different people. Implement the one that makes the most sense for your environments, right? REST is probably going to be here for a while until something else supplants it. It is probably the simplest way to set up endpoints and have applications talk to each other, have clients talk to applications. The author of the idea has one interpretation. The internet has taken it and made its own interpretation. I'm not here to pass judgment. I'm just basically saying there are different ways to look at this. And if you really want to go down the rabbit hole of watching a dumpster fire of discussions, check out the reviews on this canonical book on RESTful APIs. There are some very miserable people in the comments there. But anyway, next videos, I'll show you some RESTful demos in Flask, in Java, and hopefully that kind of gives you an idea of what we can do with some of the technologies out there. Okay, other than that, hope you all have a delightful week, and I will see you next time.